Consciousness, the silent observer within, the mysterious presence behind our thoughts, memories, and dreams. It's what makes you you, yet no one truly knows what it is. Is it the soul, a product of the brain, a spark of the universe itself? For centuries, thinkers, scientists, and spiritual seekers have tried to unravel the secrets of human consciousness. And in this video, we'll take a deep and gentle journey through all the questions, theories, and discoveries that surround this profound mystery. So close your eyes, get comfortable, and let the quiet hum of curiosity guide you into a state of peace. We'll travel through ancient philosophy, modern neuroscience, lucid dreams, near-death experiences, meditation, and beyond. This is your doorway into the most fascinating and perhaps unknowable part of being human. Let's begin. The mystery of consciousness. What is it that allows us to experience the world? Not just see or hear or touch, but to feel that we are seeing, hearing, and touching. What creates that inner movie, that voice inside our heads, the sensation of being awake and alive? This is the mystery of consciousness. The word itself has ancient roots, but its essence has puzzled minds across time and culture. Some of the earliest philosophical writings from India and Greece already hinted at this strange, ineffable presence. The Upanishads spoke of the Atman, the inner self, as a spark of divine consciousness. Meanwhile, in the West, Plato and Aristotle wrestled with the nature of the soul and perception. What unites all these perspectives is the sense that there is something within us that cannot be measured, yet seems to define everything we are. We are not just beings reacting to stimuli like machines. We are aware of those reactions. We can observe our own thoughts, question our emotions, and imagine worlds that don't exist. That ability, self-awareness, is one of the defining features of consciousness. It's what allows you, right now, to hear these words and know that you are hearing them. In modern times, consciousness is studied by neuroscientists, psychologists, and philosophers. But it still resists full explanation. Many scientists call it the hard problem. That's the term coined by philosopher David Chalmers in the 1990s. The hard problem asks, how can physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experiences? Why does activity in neurons lead to the feeling of color, pain, or joy? We can explain how the eyes see red, but why does red feel like red? Why does anything feel like anything? Some thinkers believe that consciousness arises purely from complexity, that once a system, like the human brain, reaches a certain level of intricacy, consciousness just emerges. Others propose that consciousness is more fundamental, perhaps even a property of the universe, like space or time. In this view, our brains don't create consciousness. They channel it, like antennas picking up a cosmic signal. This is not just a philosophical musing. The question of consciousness touches everything from medicine and ethics to technology and spirituality. Can a machine be conscious? What does it mean to lose consciousness? And where do we go when that happens? Is consciousness continuous, or does it arise and vanish every moment? These are not easy questions, but they are deeply human ones. Let's slow down, take a deep breath, and explore this world more deeply. Imagine you are lying on your back in a quiet room. There's no sound, no movement, and yet your mind is alive. You might notice thoughts drifting in, sensations on your skin, or perhaps a flicker of emotion. You are conscious. You are aware that you are aware, and that in itself is extraordinary. In the next part of our journey, we'll look at what ancient civilizations believed about consciousness. From the Vedic sages of India to the mystics of Egypt and the scholars of Greece, we'll see how humans have long sought to understand the light within. To understand how we've arrived at our current views of consciousness, we must first look back, far back, before modern science, before the microscope, even before written language. Because long before we had brain scans and theories of neurons, humans still experienced the mystery of consciousness, and they asked the same questions we do now. What is this awareness? Where does it come from? What happens to it when we die? Let's begin in the ancient East, where some of the oldest texts in human history describe consciousness not as a function of the body, but as the essence of reality itself. In the ancient Indian texts known as the Vedas, and later in the Upanishads, consciousness is referred to as Atman, the true self, the soul that underlies all experience. But the Upanishads take it further. They describe Brahman, the ultimate reality, as being pure consciousness. The radical idea here is that the self and the cosmos are not separate. Atman is Brahman. Your individual consciousness is not just yours. It is a reflection of universal awareness. In one famous passage, a teacher tells his student to dissolve salt in water. When asked the next day to retrieve the salt, the student cannot. It's gone. The teacher then explains, just as the salt is still present in every drop of that water, even though you can't see it, so too is the self present in all things. Consciousness, in this view, is not confined to the body. It is the very fabric of the universe. Across the Himalayas, early Chinese philosophy also wrestled with the nature of mind and awareness. In Taoism, the Tao, the way, is the source of all things, including thought and being. To be in harmony with the Tao is to let go of the illusion of separateness and align oneself with the flow of nature. Here, consciousness is not so much a thing to analyze, but a state to enter, a state of presence, simplicity, and deep connection. Confucianism, though more focused on ethics and society, also valued awareness, especially the awareness of one's role and responsibilities. The cultivation of the self was not just about knowledge, but about reflection, a deep inner tuning that led to wisdom. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, the soul was seen as complex, with multiple components. The ka was your life force, the ba, your personality, and the akh, the form you took in the afterlife. Egyptians believed that the heart, not the brain, was the seat of thought and feeling. This is why, during mummification, the brain was often discarded while the heart was preserved. Consciousness to them was bound to the soul and would continue in the next world, judged by the gods. In Greece, thinkers like Pythagoras and Heraclitus pondered the soul and the logos, an underlying order to the cosmos. But it was Plato who offered one of the earliest detailed theories of consciousness in the West. He saw the soul as immortal, trapped in a physical body, yearning to return to the world of forms, eternal truths that exist beyond our senses. In his famous allegory of the cave, humans are like prisoners watching shadows on a wall, unaware of the true light behind them. Consciousness, for Plato, is the journey of the soul awakening to truth. Aristotle, Plato's student, was more empirical. He believed the soul was the form of the body. It gave the body its life and functions. He divided the soul into parts: the vegetative for growth and reproduction, the sensitive for perception and movement, and the rational for thinking and reasoning. Humans, he said, possess all three, with the rational soul being the highest. In ancient Persia, Zoroastrianism spoke of the Fravashi, a kind of guardian spirit or higher self that existed before birth and continued after death. Consciousness was seen as a battleground between truth and falsehood, light and darkness. The choices one made in life would determine the soul's fate in the afterlife. Further east, in indigenous and shamanic traditions, consciousness was not just something humans had. It was shared by animals, plants, rocks, rivers, and the wind. Shamans entered altered states to communicate with these other forms of awareness, often guided by dreams, drumming, or sacred plants. These traditions remind us that consciousness need not be tied only to logic and thought. It can be expansive, fluid, and interconnected. Buddhism, arising in India around the 5th century BCE, took a revolutionary stance. It taught that there is no permanent self, no unchanging consciousness behind our experience. Instead, what we call the self is a collection of ever-changing processes: perception, sensation, thought, and awareness, all arising and passing away. This doctrine is called anatta, or non-self, but this doesn't mean there is no consciousness. Rather, Buddhism focuses on the mind as a dynamic flow. Through meditation, one can observe the arising of thoughts and sensations without identifying with them. The goal is not to define consciousness, but to free it from suffering, attachment, and illusion. The Buddha described consciousness, vijnana, as one of the 5 aggregates that make up a person, but he also pointed out that consciousness is dependent. It arises with contact, with perception. It is not an independent thing, but part of an ongoing process. Yet, in later schools of Buddhism, especially Mahayana and Tibetan traditions, consciousness takes on a more mystical role. In Dzogchen, for instance, the highest state is the recognition of Rigpa, pure, primordial awareness, beyond thought, beyond duality. So across these ancient traditions, we see a profound range of ideas. In some, consciousness is the eternal self. In others, it is a fleeting illusion. Sometimes it is cosmic, sometimes it is deeply personal, but always it is recognized as central to the human experience. These perspectives still shape our understanding today. In fact, many modern thinkers are revisiting these ancient views, especially in the face of consciousness's stubborn resistance to scientific explanation. In the next section, we will look at how the scientific revolution tried to make sense of the mind. From Descartes' famous "I think, therefore I am," to the dawn of brain science and psychology, we'll explore how Western thought shifted toward the biological and what it gained and lost in the process. But for now, take a deep breath. You are a being made of stories, ancient and new. And the mystery of consciousness is not just something to solve, but something to feel. That quiet witness behind your thoughts, the light behind your eyes. That is what we are exploring. And there is so much more to discover. As the ancient world faded and the Middle Ages rose, much of the philosophical conversation about consciousness was absorbed into religious thought, particularly within Christianity and Islam. The soul, divine in origin, was considered the seat of consciousness. It was God who had breathed life into man, and that life was sacred, indivisible, and largely mysterious. But by the time the Renaissance and scientific revolution emerged, a seismic shift began to occur. The world was changing. Telescopes were revealing moons orbiting distant planets. Microscopes uncovered hidden life in drops of water. The universe, once filled with mystery and magic, was becoming something that could be measured. And this transformation didn't stop at the stars or the cells. It extended to the human being itself. Enter René Descartes, a French philosopher and mathematician whose name would become forever tied to the philosophy of consciousness. Descartes sought certainty, something beyond doubt, and so he stripped away everything that could be questioned until he reached one undeniable fact. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This single sentence became the foundation of modern Western thought. Descartes concluded that while all else could be an illusion, the fact that he was thinking proved his existence. Consciousness, then, was proof of being. But Descartes also introduced a powerful and controversial idea: dualism. He argued that the mind and the body were two entirely different substances. The body was physical, mechanical, and governed by laws. The mind, or soul, was immaterial, indivisible, and free. According to this view, the brain might be a machine, but the mind was something else entirely. This division sparked centuries of debate. If the mind and body are separate, how do they interact? Descartes suggested the pineal gland, a small structure deep in the brain, was the point of contact. But the problem remained. How can something non-physical affect something physical? How can a ghost move a machine? As science advanced, many thinkers began to reject dualism. It seemed simpler to assume that the mind was just what the brain did. This idea, materialism, suggests that consciousness is a byproduct of physical processes. Just as digestion comes from the stomach and liver, thought comes from neurons firing in the brain, but the mystery persisted. Yes, we could describe what parts of the brain lit up when someone felt pain or joy. But that still didn't explain why those brain processes created a feeling, why they were accompanied by subjective experience. Why does a pattern of electricity and chemicals feel like sadness? Why does it feel like anything at all? This was the dawn of empirical psychology. Scientists like Wilhelm Wundt and William James began studying the mind using controlled experiments. James, in particular, was fascinated by the stream of consciousness, the way thoughts, feelings, and sensations flowed together in an unbroken river. He wrote, "Consciousness does not appear to itself chopped up in bits. It is nothing jointed, it flows." James also acknowledged the limitations of science in understanding the whole of consciousness. He was open to the idea that consciousness might have layers, or even exist beyond the brain. His openness laid the groundwork for later thinkers who would blur the lines between psychology, philosophy, and mysticism. In the 20th century, psychology took a sharp turn. The rise of behaviorism, led by figures like John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner, tried to remove consciousness from the picture altogether. Behaviorists argued that since we couldn't see or measure consciousness directly, we should focus only on what could be observed, behavior. The mind was a black box, and its contents were irrelevant to understanding human action. This view dominated for decades, but it left a vacuum. It ignored what it feels like to be human. Our thoughts, dreams, and inner life reduced to nothing more than stimuli and responses. Eventually, this approach gave way to the cognitive revolution, which reintroduced the mind as something that could be studied scientifically. Computers became a metaphor for the brain. Inputs, outputs, memory, processing. Cognitive scientists began building models of how the brain processed information and how thoughts formed. This was a huge step, but still, it skirted around the mystery of qualia, the raw feel of experience. What is it like to see the color blue, or taste coffee, or feel heartbreak? These questions remained elusive. Consciousness was back in the spotlight, but still deeply puzzling. In parallel with these developments, the field of neuroscience exploded. Advances in imaging technology allowed scientists to watch the brain in action. We could see which areas activated during decision-making, memory, or meditation. We discovered the role of the prefrontal cortex in planning and attention, the amygdala in emotion, the hippocampus in memory. Some even began to locate the neural correlates of consciousness, patterns of brain activity that reliably match conscious experience. But again, correlation is not causation. Just because brain activity accompanies consciousness doesn't mean it explains it. And that's the heart of the issue. Despite all the data, we still don't know how consciousness arises. We can build machines that play chess, recognize faces, even compose music. But none of them seem to be aware. They don't feel. At least, not yet. This has led some to propose that perhaps we are missing something fundamental, that our scientific models, as powerful as they are, might not be enough. Some scientists and philosophers have begun to explore more radical ideas. Perhaps consciousness is not an emergent property of matter, but a fundamental feature of reality, like space or time. This is known as panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is a basic building block of the universe, present in all things in some form. This is not a return to mysticism, but a serious philosophical position gaining traction among thinkers like Galen Strawson, Philip Goff, and Christoph Koch. If even electrons have a rudimentary form of awareness, then maybe consciousness didn't emerge from matter. It was always there, waiting to evolve into the complex forms we experience today. Another view is integrated information theory, proposed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi. According to this theory, consciousness corresponds to the integration of information in a system. The more interconnected and unified the information processing, the more conscious it is. This theory even offers a mathematical measure, phi, to quantify consciousness. Though still controversial and debated, it attempts to bridge subjective experience with objective data. These ideas mark a turning point in how we think about consciousness. No longer just the domain of philosophers or neuroscientists, it's becoming a crossroads where science, philosophy, and spirituality meet. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore altered states of consciousness, dreams, meditation, psychedelics, and near-death experiences. These strange and powerful phenomena stretch the boundaries of what we consider the normal waking mind. And they might offer clues about the deeper nature of awareness itself. But for now, just breathe. Notice your thoughts. Feel the stillness behind them. You are conscious. And no one, not even the greatest minds in history, fully understands what that means. And yet, it is the most familiar thing of all. As the scientific method matured, so too did our understanding of biology. The body was increasingly seen as a machine. The heart pumped blood. The lungs brought oxygen. The brain processed information. And yet, the mind remained a stubborn enigma. In the 19th century, Sigmund Freud took psychology in a new direction. Instead of ignoring consciousness, he dove into its depths, especially the parts we don't normally access. Freud's theory of the unconscious proposed that much of our behavior is shaped by hidden desires, repressed memories, and unresolved conflicts. He introduced the idea that the mind is layered: the conscious, the pre-conscious, and the unconscious. And in dreams, he believed, the unconscious revealed itself, symbolically, indirectly, but truthfully. Though many of Freud's specific theories have been criticized or revised, his larger insight remains powerful. Much of what we experience is only the surface of a deeper, unseen mental world. As we moved into the 20th century, thinkers began probing even deeper into the structures and functions of consciousness. Carl Jung, Freud's student turned rival, expanded the unconscious to include not just personal repressions, but a collective unconscious, a shared well of archetypes and myths passed down through human history. For Jung, consciousness was not only an individual phenomenon, but part of a much larger symbolic network that connected all people across time and culture. Jung's ideas resonated deeply with both Eastern philosophy and Western mysticism. He believed that dreams, visions, and spiritual experiences were windows into the self, and into something beyond the self. At the same time, scientists were pushing forward with more empirical methods. Electroencephalography, EEG, allowed researchers to monitor brain waves, those rhythmic patterns of electrical activity in the brain. Different states of consciousness, from waking to dreaming to meditative absorption, could now be measured. We learned about alpha waves associated with relaxed alertness, theta waves linked to deep meditation and light sleep, delta waves present in the deeper stages of dreamless sleep, and beta waves, the fast, focused activity of everyday thought. This growing understanding led to new treatments for mental illness, new theories of cognition, and even new debates about what consciousness actually is. But as we studied the brain more closely, strange and unexpected findings began to emerge. Patients with split brain surgery, whose corpus callosum had been severed to treat severe epilepsy, revealed something shocking. When the two hemispheres of the brain could no longer communicate, it seemed as if two separate streams of consciousness emerged within the same person. One side could see something without the other side knowing. One hand could perform an action that surprised the other. It was as if two minds were inhabiting one body. What did this mean? Was the self an illusion? A fragile construction held together by a web of neural connections? Then came the discovery of blind sight, a condition where patients with damage to their visual cortex claimed they were blind in part of their visual field, yet could still guess the location of objects with surprising accuracy. They had no conscious awareness of seeing, but the information was still being processed at some level. These cases suggested that perception and consciousness are not always the same. The brain can perform tasks without the mind being aware. This led scientists to explore the possibility of unconscious processing, a vast realm of cognitive activity beneath the surface of awareness. Another major area of research was attention. We learned that consciousness is highly selective. We can only focus on a tiny fraction of the information bombarding us at any given moment. The famous invisible gorilla experiment demonstrated how people could completely miss obvious events, like a person in a gorilla suit walking through a basketball game, if their attention was focused elsewhere. This selective nature of consciousness raised new questions. Is consciousness just what we pay attention to, or is it something more? Around the same time, philosophy of mind emerged as a full-fledged academic field. Thinkers like Thomas Nagel, in his essay, "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?", argued that consciousness is defined by subjectivity, the unique first-person point of view. No matter how much we understand the biology of bats, we'll never truly know what it's like to be a bat. That what it's like quality, that qualia, is the core of conscious experience. Others, like Daniel Dennett, challenged this view, suggesting that consciousness is not a single thing, but a collection of mental processes operating in parallel. He compared the mind to a multiple drafts model, where various narratives are constructed and revised until one becomes dominant. In this view, the self is not a unified observer, but more like a committee. Meanwhile, David Chalmers laid down a powerful challenge to materialism with his framing of the hard problem of consciousness. Why does any of this feel like anything at all? Why isn't the brain just a cold, mechanical calculator? Why does it light up with emotion, color, memory, and love? Chalmers proposed that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of the universe, like space or time, not something that emerges, but something that is. This view, radical yet increasingly discussed, aligns with the ancient traditions that saw consciousness as the ground of being. We are now at a strange crossroads. On one hand, science has mapped much of the brain's activity. We know which regions govern language, emotion, memory, and even self-awareness. We can detect when someone is dreaming, meditating, or entering anesthesia, and yet, the core mystery remains. Why is it like this to be alive? Why does love feel so warm? Why does music stir the heart? Why does the color green feel different from the color red? These questions take us beyond data and back into mystery. In response, some researchers are exploring non-ordinary states of consciousness, including those induced by meditation, fasting, sleep deprivation, or psychedelic substances. These states seem to alter the boundaries of the self, dissolve the usual categories of perception, and sometimes produce profound feelings of unity or transcendence. Are these just brain tricks? Or are they glimpses into a deeper layer of reality? This is the frontier we'll explore next. Because to truly understand consciousness, we must not only study it, we must experience it in all its dimensions. But for now, rest in this awareness. Behind your thoughts, behind your words, there is a silent watcher. That presence is consciousness. And even as science tries to pin it down, it continues to float just beyond the edge of understanding, like a dream you can't quite remember, but somehow still feel. When we think of consciousness, we often think of waking life, being alert, aware, and engaged with the world around us. But much of what we experience happens outside of that narrow window. Every night we slip into strange inner realms, and at other times we find ourselves in trance, flow, or deep silence. These are altered states of consciousness, states that stretch the boundaries of the everyday mind and offer glimpses into the unknown. Let's begin with dreams, one of the most universal and mysterious altered states. For thousands of years, dreams were considered messages from the gods, windows into the soul, or prophecies of the future. In the ancient world, dream temples were places where people slept in hopes of receiving divine visions. And even today, we marvel at the surreal worlds our minds construct while we sleep. During sleep, our brain cycles through stages, from light sleep to deep sleep to REM, rapid eye movement, sleep. It's during REM that most vivid dreams occur. The body is paralyzed, but the brain becomes intensely active. It's as if a movie is playing, only you are both the director and the audience. Dreams often defy logic. Time bends, places change, people merge. Yet, within the dream, it usually all seems perfectly normal. It's only when we wake that we realize how strange it all was. This raises fascinating questions. How can the brain create such detailed, immersive experiences without any input from the outside world? And why does it do this every night? Some scientists believe dreaming serves a cognitive function, helping us process emotions, consolidate memories, or rehearse challenges. Others think dreams are the brain's attempt to find meaning in random neural activity. But there are also deeper, more mysterious views. In many indigenous cultures, dreams are not illusions. They are another kind of reality. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia speak of the dream time, a timeless spiritual dimension that shapes the physical world. Shamans and mystics across traditions have used dreams as portals into other realms of consciousness. In Tibetan Buddhism, dream yoga trains the mind to remain aware during dreams, transforming sleep into a spiritual practice. This brings us to the fascinating phenomenon of lucid dreaming, when the dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming. In this state, you can fly, change the scenery, speak to dream characters, or explore the dream world with full consciousness. Lucid dreams feel real, sometimes more real than waking life, and they suggest that consciousness is not fixed. It can be fluid, layered, and astonishingly creative. But dreams are only one doorway. Another is meditation, a practice found in nearly every spiritual tradition. At its core, meditation is about turning inward. It's about observing the mind rather than getting lost in its contents. And when practiced consistently, it can lead to profound shifts in consciousness. There are many forms of meditation. Mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Concentration. Meditation focuses the mind on a single object, like the breath, a mantra, or a flame. Loving-kindness meditation cultivates compassion. Transcendental meditation uses silent mantras to quiet the mind. In deeper states, meditators often report a loss of the sense of self. The usual boundaries between me and not me begin to dissolve. Thoughts slow, then stop, and in their place arises a vast, peaceful awareness, open, spacious, and timeless. Advanced practitioners speak of samadhi, a state of deep absorption where the mind becomes completely still. Others describe non-dual awareness, a state where the subject-object divide disappears, and all experience is simply happening, without a doer or observer. What's remarkable is that these states are not just subjective anecdotes. Brain scans of experienced meditators show distinct patterns: increased activity in areas related to attention and emotional regulation, and decreased activity in the default mode network, a system linked to mind wandering and the sense of a separate self. This suggests that the self, our usual sense of I, is not a fixed entity. It's a process, a pattern of neural activity. And that pattern can be quieted, altered, or even temporarily turned off. Then there are the more dramatic shifts in consciousness, those brought about by psychedelics. Substances like psilocybin, found in magic mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, and DMT have been used for centuries in sacred rituals. Indigenous peoples of the Amazon drink ayahuasca to connect with spirits. The Mazatec of Mexico use mushrooms to receive wisdom. In recent years, these substances have returned to the scientific spotlight. Under controlled conditions, researchers have given psychedelics to volunteers and recorded their experiences and brain activity. The results are extraordinary. Users often report a dissolution of the ego, the sense that they are separate from the world. Some feel they are merging with the universe. Others encounter entities, receive insights, or enter realms that feel more real than waking life. Many describe the experience as one of the most meaningful of their lives, comparable to childbirth or the death of a loved one. On the neurological level, psychedelics reduce activity in the default mode network, the same region that meditation quiets. This may explain the loss of ego boundaries. Meanwhile, other parts of the brain become hyperconnected. Regions that normally don't communicate begin talking to each other, creating a rich tapestry of perception and emotion. Psychedelics aren't just about colorful visuals. They are about consciousness, what it is, how it changes, and what lies beyond the normal filters of perception. This brings us to one of the most profound. Altered states, near-death experiences, NDEs. Thousands of people across cultures have reported similar events when close to death. They describe floating outside their bodies, moving through tunnels, seeing bright light, encountering deceased loved ones, or reviewing their entire lives in an instant. Many return with a transformed sense of purpose, less fear of death, and a belief in some form of continued existence. Skeptics argue that these experiences are caused by lack of oxygen, brain chemicals, or hallucinations. But the similarity of reports across cultures, religions, and ages raises deeper questions. Is consciousness tied to the brain, or can it exist independently? What happens to awareness when the brain stops? Some scientists are now studying NDEs under controlled conditions, monitoring patients during cardiac arrest, searching for brain activity when there should be none. The results are still emerging, but the questions remain wide open, and they don't end there. Other altered states include flow, that sense of total immersion in an activity where time disappears and action feels effortless. Flow is often experienced by athletes, musicians, and artists. There's also hypnosis, where people enter a trance-like state and respond to suggestions in ways they normally wouldn't, and sensory deprivation, which can lead to hallucinations, deep insights, or even out-of-body experiences. Each of these states tells us something vital. Consciousness is not one thing. It's a spectrum, a landscape, and most of us live in only a small corner of it. So what do these states mean? Are they tricks of the brain, or doorways to something more? Are we uncovering deeper layers of mind, or simply losing control? The answer may be both. What is clear is that altered states challenge our assumptions. They reveal that consciousness is not fixed. It is fluid, dynamic, and infinitely rich. And it may hold answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore the most radical possibilities. Can consciousness exist without a brain? What is the nature of the self? And is the universe itself conscious? But for now, rest in this awareness. You are more than your thoughts. You are the space they arise in. You are not just awake, you are the witness of awakening. And that is a mystery worth savoring. Let's now delve deeper into some of the extraordinary experiences and emerging research that push the boundaries of what we know about consciousness. Out-of-body experiences, OBEs, are among the most compelling altered states reported throughout human history. People claim to float above their own bodies, see themselves lying below, and sometimes travel to other places, real or imagined. These experiences can be spontaneous, triggered by trauma, sleep paralysis, meditation, or even extreme relaxation. Neuroscientists have tried to reproduce OBEs in laboratories. In one famous study, researchers used virtual reality and tactile feedback to trick participants into feeling that their consciousness had shifted outside their bodies. They discovered that the temporoparietal junction, a region in the brain that integrates visual, spatial, and sensory information, plays a key role. When disrupted, this region can lead to a breakdown in the body's spatial unity and create the illusion of separation. Yet, despite such explanations, many people who've had OBEs insist they were more than illusions. Some report verifiable details, objects or events they couldn't have perceived from their actual physical perspective. While these accounts remain controversial, they continue to challenge the idea that consciousness is fully confined within the skull. Another powerful altered state is mystical experience, often described as a feeling of unity with all things, the dissolution of ego, overwhelming peace, or a sense of encountering the divine. These experiences are reported not just in religious contexts, but also during moments of awe, intense emotion, or deep insight. The psychologist William James defined mystical experiences as having four main features. They are ineffable, hard to describe in words, noetic, conveying deep knowledge, transient, short-lived, and passive, not willed but received. He believed they revealed something real about the nature of existence, perhaps more real than waking life. Modern researchers are now studying these experiences in controlled settings, especially using psilocybin, the active compound in certain mushrooms. In clinical trials, people report profound mystical states that often lead to lasting psychological growth, reduced anxiety, and even relief from depression. These results suggest that such experiences are not just bizarre anomalies, they may be integral to human healing and transformation. Then there's sensory deprivation, a state achieved by cutting off external stimuli. This can be done using flotation tanks, blindfolds, silence, or isolation. Initially, the mind becomes quiet, but soon, unexpected things happen. The brain, deprived of input, begins to generate its own sensations. People often experience vivid imagery, voices, or even full-blown visions. Some find the experience calming, others unsettling. The implications are profound. Consciousness doesn't need external input to remain active. It creates its own reality. And in doing so, it reveals its remarkable capacity for creativity, projection, and introspection. In contrast, sensory overload, such as during festivals, ecstatic dancing, chanting, or rhythmic drumming, can also shift consciousness. These practices, found in cultures worldwide, often lead to trance states, visions, or the sensation of being possessed by spirits. In neuroscience terms, rhythmic stimulation can entrain brainwaves, altering the default state of awareness. This raises a crucial point. Consciousness is not fixed to a single mode. It can be shaped, shifted, expanded, or narrowed by countless variables: chemical, emotional, social, and spiritual. Flow states are another form of altered consciousness, but they occur during peak performance rather than introspection. When you're fully absorbed in an activity, playing music, writing, climbing a mountain, you may lose track of time, sense of self, or even physical discomfort. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists call it inspiration. Psychologists call it flow. Flow states are characterized by focused attention, a balance of challenge and skill, clear goals, and immediate feedback. The brain enters a unique state, blending high focus with relaxed control. Dopamine and norepinephrine levels increase, enhancing motivation and creativity. And in these moments, the usual narrative self fades away, replaced by direct, unfiltered experience. What's intriguing is that flow, like meditation, quiets the default mode network, suggesting that peak performance and deep stillness may share neurological roots. Both involve letting go of the ego. Both access a deeper layer of being. In modern times, technological tools are being developed to induce altered states more intentionally. Neurofeedback, transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, binaural beats, and even virtual reality environments are being used to modulate consciousness. These tools offer new possibilities, but also new ethical questions. If we can hack consciousness, who decides how it's used? And that leads us to one of the most sensitive and awe-inspiring altered states, the moment of death. Across cultures, the dying process has been described as a transition, not an end. Many people who come close to death report a sense of detachment from the body, encounters with light or beings, a life review, and a sense of peace or love beyond words. These near-death experiences, NDEs, while often dismissed as hallucinations, continue to defy easy explanation. In a groundbreaking study known as the AWARE Project, researchers placed hidden images in hospital rooms and studied patients who had undergone cardiac arrest. The goal was to see if consciousness could persist and observe even when the brain was inactive. While results remain inconclusive, the study highlighted an essential point. Our understanding of consciousness at the edge of life is still primitive. Some researchers speculate that consciousness might not be generated by the brain, but filtered through it. This idea, known as the filter theory, suggests that the brain limits and focuses awareness for survival purposes. When the brain is damaged or shut down through trauma, drugs, or death, this filter may weaken, allowing access to a broader reality. This echoes the insights of many mystics who describe the mind as a veil that must be lifted to perceive the infinite. It also aligns with modern theories like orchestrated objective reduction, OR, proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. They suggest that consciousness arises from quantum processes in the brain's microtubules, structures inside neurons. If true, this would mean consciousness is not just biological but quantum, linking it to the fabric of space-time. Though controversial, these ideas point to a profound possibility that consciousness is not an accidental byproduct of matter, but a fundamental aspect of the cosmos. So where does this leave us? In every altered state, from dreams to meditation, from psychedelics to death, consciousness reveals its fluidity, its vastness, and its ability to transcend the ordinary. These states challenge our assumptions. They invite us to ask not just how consciousness works, but what it is, and why it exists at all. Perhaps, in the end, altered states are not anomalies. Perhaps they are clues. Clues that consciousness is not a single room, but a cathedral. And most of us have only explored the entryway. In the next part, we'll take these insights further and explore the self, what it is, how it forms, and whether it even truly exists. We'll ask, who are you, and what does it mean to say I? But for now, breathe in the mystery. Feel the vastness behind your thoughts. Let your awareness expand. You are not just a mind. You are the space in which the mind appears. As we move deeper into the spectrum of altered states, we begin to see a recurring pattern, a quiet dissolution of the ordinary self, and in its place, a glimpse of something vast, still, and profound. In our normal waking state, we carry around a strong sense of identity. We have a name, memories, preferences, beliefs. We know who we are, or at least we think we do. But in altered states, that identity often begins to waver. Take sleep paralysis, a state where the body remains paralyzed during REM sleep, but the mind becomes aware. It can be terrifying. Many people report a feeling of pressure on the chest or a presence in the room. In many cultures, this experience has given rise to myths. Shadow people, demons, spirits. But from a neurological standpoint, it's a collision of waking and dreaming, where two forms of consciousness overlap, creating strange and haunting sensations. But sometimes, sleep paralysis leads to something even more mysterious: spontaneous out-of-body experiences. The person feels themselves rising above their physical form, floating, or even traveling through unfamiliar landscapes. For some, this moment is liberating. The boundaries of the body disappear, and a new sense of self emerges, not confined to flesh or bone, but spacious, untethered. Another fascinating phenomenon is hypnagogia, the state between waking and sleeping. In this liminal space, the mind generates vivid imagery, sounds, and sensations. You might hear voices calling your name, see landscapes forming and dissolving, or feel as though you're falling or flying. This state is fleeting but incredibly creative. Many artists, writers, and inventors have drawn inspiration from hypnagogic visions. Salvador Dali would hold a key between his fingers while sitting in a chair. As he drifted towards sleep, the key would fall, waking him just in time to capture the surreal images rising from the edge of consciousness. This state shows us that consciousness is not a binary, on or off, but a gradient, a fluid movement between clarity and dream. And in this fluidity lies a rich source of insight, creativity, and transformation. Then there are entheogenic states, altered by sacred plants or substances used ritually for spiritual purposes. The word entheogen means generating the divine within. Indigenous cultures have long understood that these substances are not recreational tools, but doorways into deeper realms of spirit and self. In the Amazon, shamans drink ayahuasca, a brew containing DMT, one of the most powerful known psychedelics. In the right setting, under guidance, ayahuasca brings visions, purging, and emotional release. Drinkers report contact with plant spirits, ancestors, or a cosmic intelligence that teaches, heals, and reveals hidden truths. In Gabon, the Bwiti religion uses iboga, a powerful root bark that induces deep introspection, life reviews, and ego dissolution. In Mexico, the Wixárika people use peyote to enter states of communion with nature and the divine. What is common across all these traditions is intention. These altered states are not accidents or escapes. They are ceremonies, journeys, spiritual technologies designed to expand awareness and realign the soul with its deepest purpose. Modern science is now validating what these traditions have long known. Psilocybin, for example, is being used in clinical settings to help people with depression, addiction, PTSD, and existential anxiety. In controlled doses and with support, the psychedelic experience can bring about rapid, lasting change, often through a moment of mystical insight. These insights often center around a few core revelations: that the self is not fixed, that all things are connected, and that love or compassion is the fundamental truth of existence. These are not merely ideas. They are felt as real, beyond doubt, more true than any philosophy or belief. This suggests that the architecture of consciousness is far more flexible than we think. Our normal state, with its constant self-talk and separation, is just one mode. And beneath it, or beyond it, lies something more expansive. One of the most compelling altered states is ego death, the complete loss of the sense of self. This can occur during deep meditation, intense psychedelic trips, or near-death experiences. People describe a total dissolution of personal identity. There is no I left, just awareness, infinite, boundless awareness in which all distinctions disappear. This state can be terrifying, but also blissful. Without the ego, there is no fear, no grasping, no judgment. There is only presence, only being. In many spiritual traditions, this is the goal. The mystics of all ages have pointed toward this state, using different language: union with God, enlightenment, nirvana, the ground of being. And remarkably, modern accounts from meditators, scientists, and ordinary people echo the same themes. Let us not forget the role of silence, not just the absence of noise, but the silence of the mind. In our culture, we are surrounded by stimulation, screens, voices, thoughts. But when all of that falls away, what remains? In extended retreats, where people spend days or weeks in silence, something shifts. The inner chatter slows, emotions rise and fall. And beneath it all, a deep stillness is revealed. A stillness that feels more alive than any activity. This stillness is not passive. It is conscious. It is aware without thinking, seeing without looking, knowing without analysis. Some call it pure awareness, the background in which all experiences unfold. And this brings us full circle. Altered states show us that consciousness is not merely a flicker in the brain. It is a vast ocean, of which the waking mind is just a wave. What if these states are not exceptions, but the rule? What if our ordinary consciousness is the most altered of all, narrowed by survival, language, culture, and habit? Perhaps the mind, in its natural state, is expansive, fluid, and interconnected. Perhaps we are always swimming in awareness, only we forget. And altered states are the moments when we remember. We are not saying that all altered states are truths. Some may be distortions, illusions, or dreams. But even illusions can reveal something real about how the mind works, about what we fear, about what we yearn for. So what are we left with? We are left with wonder, with humility, with the realization that consciousness is more than neurons, more than identity, more than survival. It is a mystery that opens into mystery, and it is ours. As we prepare to enter the next part of this journey, we'll focus on the self, that fragile, persistent construct at the center of our experience. We'll ask, what is the self made of? Where does it come from? And what happens when it disappears? But for now, let the edges of your awareness soften. Let yourself drift. Let the ordinary dissolve into the vast. Because the world of altered states is not elsewhere. It is here. It is within. And it is waiting. Who are you? If you close your eyes and look inward, what do you find? A name, surely. A personal history. Preferences, memories, plans. You might find a stream of thoughts, perhaps an emotion lingering from the day, a body beneath it all, pulsing with sensation. But who or what is having these experiences? Is there a solid entity sitting at the center of it all, observing, judging, choosing? Or is the self just a story, a fluid, ever-changing performance that only appears solid because we never stop playing it? The question of the self is among the oldest and deepest in human thought. It is central to every religion, every philosophy, every exploration of consciousness. And yet, despite centuries of inquiry, the self remains elusive. We all feel like we have one, but try to pin it down and it dissolves. Is the self an object in the brain? A metaphysical soul? A bundle of neural patterns? Or is it, as many sages have suggested, an illusion? Useful perhaps, but ultimately unreal. Let's begin with the brain's role. Neuroscience shows that the sense of self is not localized in a single spot, but distributed across multiple regions. The default mode network, often called the DMN, plays a crucial part. It becomes active when we are daydreaming, recalling the past, imagining the future, or thinking about ourselves. It's the narrative mind, the part of us that constructs identity, tells our story, replays conversations, fantasizes about what we'll say next time. This is the home of the internal monologue, the I that comments, remembers, and plans. And yet, it's just one of many systems operating in the brain. Damage to certain areas can radically change personality, erase memories, or even create multiple selves, as seen in rare cases of dissociative identity disorder. There's also compelling evidence that the self is constructed moment by moment. When you look at your hand, different brain regions process color, shape, motion, and position. But somehow, this information is integrated into a single, coherent experience. The same happens for your memories, your values, your voice. They're all pieced together from fragments. The unity of the self is not a given. It is assembled, stitched together by the brain like a movie editor cutting film. Consciousness doesn't just flow, it's built, frame by frame, but edited so seamlessly we forget it's a production. Philosophy, especially in the East, has long challenged the solidity of the self. In Buddhism, one of the core teachings is anatta, the doctrine of no self. The Buddha taught that what we call the self is just a bundle of 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are constantly changing, arising, and passing away. There is no enduring core, no I that exists separate from the flow of experience. This isn't meant to be a bleak message. It's liberation. If the self is not fixed, we are not chained to it. We can let go of clinging, ego, fear. We can open to what is. Meditators who dive deep into mindfulness often begin to experience this firsthand. As the observer becomes more refined, the usual boundaries of identity begin to break down. Thoughts arise without a thinker. Sensations flow without a feeler. The body breathes, the heart beats, the mind moves, all without a self orchestrating it. At first, this can be unsettling. We are so used to being someone. But over time, it becomes freeing. The self wasn't killed. It was never there to begin with. It was a mask, a dance, a habit. Western philosophy, too, has not been immune to the mystery of the self. David Hume, in the 18th century, wrote that when he looked within, he found only a bundle of perceptions, never a self. "I never can catch myself at any time without a perception," he said. "I never can observe anything but the perception." To him, the self was not a substance, but a fiction created by the mind to organize experience. Later thinkers, like Derek Parfit, argued that personal identity is not what matters in survival, it's continuity of experience. If memories and character persist, that's enough. The idea of an indivisible self is not necessary. Then came the emergence of constructivist and social theories of the self. These perspectives emphasize that identity is shaped by language, culture, interaction. You are who you are because of your relationships, your upbringing, your role in society, the stories you've been told. Identity, in this view, is not found inside. It is co-created. A person born in a different place, time, or body would have a different self. The I is not a core, but a context. This view is both empowering and humbling. Empowering because it means we can reshape ourselves. Humbling because it reminds us that much of what we take as me is borrowed, influenced, adapted. The values we hold, the way we speak, the ideas we cherish, they all come from somewhere. And if we trace them back, we find no ultimate author, just a river of causes flowing endlessly. And yet, there is something that persists even when the story of me quiets. Something that remains when thoughts stop, when memory fades, when the ego dissolves. This is not the self as personality or biography, but as awareness, the silent knowing at the heart of all experience, the light by which everything is seen. You cannot see it, but without it, nothing would be seen. In non-dual traditions like Advaita Vedanta, this awareness is called Atman, the true self, which is not personal but universal. It is not the thinker, but the witnessing presence behind all thoughts. And it is not separate from the world. It is one with Brahman, the ground of all being. In this view, the self that dies is not the real self. The real self is eternal, boundless, unborn. Modern mystics and psychonauts often echo the same truth. Under deep meditation or psychedelics, many report a complete loss of personal identity, followed by a sense of merging with the universe. I died, they say, but something remained. That something is not a person, not a thought, just awareness, pure, luminous, infinite awareness. And perhaps that's the secret. The self we think we are is a creation, a necessary one, perhaps, for navigating the world. But beneath it, beyond it, is the self that is not made. The self that is always present, watching, not judging, just being. So, who are you? You are not your thoughts. They come and go. You are not your emotions. They rise and fall. You are not your body. It changes every moment. You are not your memories. They flicker and fade. You are the presence in which all these things appear. You are the awareness that hears these words right now. And that, whatever it is not small. It is not separate. It is not afraid. It is the same awareness in every being, the same silent witness behind every pair of eyes. And to realize this, not just as a concept, but as a living truth, is to awaken. In the next part, we'll follow this insight even further. We'll explore theories that propose consciousness is not just inside us, but is the foundation of reality itself. Could the universe be conscious? Could everything be alive with awareness? We are now entering truly cosmic territory. But for now, rest in this knowing. Not as someone, not as something, but as awareness itself. Timeless, open, silent, free. To fully grasp the nature of the self, we must confront not only its construction, but its dissolution. There are moments in life, not only through deep meditation or psychedelics, but in grief, illness, love, or awe, where the self seems to melt. Moments when the usual boundary between me and the world becomes permeable. When time slows and the chatter of identity gives way to something wordless. A parent holding their newborn, a hiker atop a mountain, breathless with scale, a musician lost in flow, a mourner staring into the abyss of loss. In these moments, the self is not destroyed, but humbled, dwarfed by something greater than itself. And in that humility, something remarkable is revealed. The self is not the source of meaning. It is not the driver of life. It is a lens, a focusing tool, a construct useful for practical navigation, but not the truth of who we are. Just as a pair of glasses shapes how we see but is not our vision itself, so too the self shapes our understanding, but is not awareness itself. And like glasses, it can be taken off. This has profound implications, not only philosophically, but ethically, socially, spiritually. If the self is not fixed, not separate, then what we do to others, we do to ourselves. The boundaries between self and other blur. Compassion is no longer a virtue, it is a recognition. To see suffering in another is to feel it within. To love another is to remember a part of yourself. This is the ground upon which the world's deepest spiritual teachings rest. Love thy neighbor as thyself, not because it's moral, but because it's true. There is no neighbor, no other, just one awareness, wearing countless masks. And yet we return, again and again, to the illusion. The self rebuilds itself constantly. Every morning we wake and remember, I am this name, with this history, this job, this face in the mirror. The story resumes, and that's okay. The illusion, after all, is not the enemy. It is part of the dance. The point is not to destroy the self, but to see through it, to recognize it as a tool, not a prison. In psychological terms, this insight is transformative. People who realize the constructed nature of identity often report greater resilience, adaptability, and peace. They are less defensive, less trapped by ego. They can laugh at themselves because they know the self is not sacred. They can let go of grudges because they are not clinging to a permanent me that was hurt. They can live more fully in the present because they are not chained to the past or obsessed with the future. But this insight must be balanced with care, because in some cases, the loosening of the self can lead not to liberation, but to fragmentation. In mental illness, particularly in psychotic states or dissociative disorders, the sense of self can disintegrate in painful ways. The structure collapses, but without support or understanding, what remains is confusion, fear, and isolation. This is why spiritual traditions emphasize preparation, context, and integration. Ego death can be healing, or it can be traumatic. It depends on how it is approached, and this is perhaps the great paradox. We must have a self in order to transcend it. A healthy ego is the platform from which we leap into the unknown. The stronger the structure, the more safely it can be let go. This is why mature spiritual work doesn't reject the self. It includes it. It polishes the self, refines it, educates it, until it becomes transparent, until it becomes a window, not a wall. Science, too, is beginning to catch up. In studies of long-term meditators, researchers find not only increased well-being, but changes in the sense of self. The usual narrative identity quiets, replaced by a more flexible, fluid awareness. The I becomes a verb, not a noun, a process, not a possession. This is not metaphysics. It is neurology. And yet, it aligns perfectly with what mystics have said for centuries. Even artificial intelligence is beginning to stir these waters. As machines grow more complex, we begin to ask, could a machine develop a sense of self? Could it become conscious? Some say yes, that with enough complexity, self-awareness will emerge. Others say no, that the self is not a computational phenomenon, but something deeper. But whatever the answer, the question reveals something about us. We equate consciousness with selfhood, but maybe that's the wrong equation. Maybe awareness is primary and the self is secondary, and if that's true, then we can let go. We can stop clinging to the story. We can still tell it, still enjoy it, but without believing it's all there is. We can hold our identities lightly, wear them like costumes, knowing they're part of the play. So take a moment, let your identity soften, let your thoughts come and go. Ask yourself gently, what is aware of these words? What is behind your eyes, watching? Not your name, not your age, not your beliefs, but the silent witness, the pure presence. You may not be able to describe it, but you can feel it. And in that feeling, there is peace. Because the self, finally, is not something to be found. It is something to be seen through. And when we see through it, we see the world. Not as objects, not as threats, not as separate things, but as part of the same vast awareness that looks out from our own eyes. That is the heart of this journey. Not to become someone, but to realize we are already something far beyond the someone we think we are. Not to escape the self, but to see it clearly, and in doing so, be free of it. In the next part of our exploration, we will step even further into mystery. We will ask whether consciousness is not only within us, but everywhere. Could the universe itself be conscious? Could reality be awareness in disguise? For now, rest. Let go of who you think you are. Breathe into the quiet. You are not the story. You are the silence in which the story unfolds. Even as we dismantle the self in theory and practice, we are left with the raw intimacy of living in a body, bearing a name, responding to a world that insists on your separateness. No matter how many meditative breakthroughs or philosophical revelations we experience, we still return to ourselves. We are still addressed by others. We still speak in first person. The self persists, not because it's real in a permanent way, but because it's useful. The illusion is sticky, and perhaps that's not a problem. Perhaps it's a feature of the human game. But within this illusion lies infinite complexity. The self is not one thing. It is a collection of parts, often contradictory. You are capable of love and resentment, confidence and doubt, generosity and jealousy. Sometimes you are bold, sometimes you shrink. These are not flaws. They are features of a mind that evolved to adapt, to survive, to belong. Psychologist Richard Schwartz developed a model known as internal family systems, IFS, which treats the self not as a single unit, but as a community of parts. In this view, your anger is a part, your shame a part, your inner critic a part. Each of these develop to protect you, to make sense of a chaotic world, and at the center of it all is the self. Not the egoic self, but a deeper, calm, compassionate awareness, capable of witnessing and healing the parts. This model mirrors ancient wisdom. In Hinduism, the Atman is the still observer behind all activity. In Jungian psychology, the self is the archetype of wholeness. In Buddhist psychology, pure awareness watches the ever-changing phenomena of mind. Across cultures and models, the theme is the same. Within the theater of personality, there is a stage, a still point, a knowing. But the parts of us are not always in harmony. Often, they are at war. The self can fracture, not just metaphorically, but experientially. Trauma, for instance, can split the psyche into compartments. One part moves on, another stays frozen. One part performs, another hides. We call this dissociation, and it reveals the fragility of the unified self. Yet from this fragmentation can arise insight. Survivors who explore their inner landscape often discover forgotten parts, long exiled, waiting to be heard. Healing begins when these parts are not pushed away, but welcomed, seen, embraced. The path to wholeness is not the elimination of parts, but the integration of them. Even in everyday life, we shift selves constantly. The self at work is not the same as the self with a lover. The self in solitude is not the self in public. These are not masks hiding a true face. They are all true, in context. Identity is not a singular sculpture, but a fluid performance. You are an improvisation, refined over time. This may sound destabilizing, but it is also freeing, because it means you are not trapped. You are not bound to the stories you've told. You can evolve, rewrite, reimagine. You are not one role, but the space in which roles appear. Modern physics offers strange parallels. In quantum mechanics, particles are not in fixed states. They exist in superposition, probabilities collapsing into reality only when observed. Consciousness, too, seems to behave this way. Fluid, contextual, indeterminate until shaped by attention. You are not fixed. You are potential. And then there's the mirror of others. Much of the self is shaped in relationship. The looking glass self, as sociologist Charles Cooley called it, suggests that we see ourselves through the eyes of others. Identity is a reflection, a response. We learn who we are by how others treat us. This can empower us or wound us deeply. A child unloved may internalize worthlessness. A person admired may rise into their power. But what happens when we step out of the mirror? When we no longer look to others for confirmation of who we are? Then the self must be rediscovered, not as performance, but as presence. And in presence, the need to be someone softens. We begin to rest in being itself. There's a reason why the world's most revered figures, spiritual leaders, saints, mystics, often speak so simply. They are not interested in status or narrative. They speak from essence. Their presence is their teaching. Their silence is eloquent. And perhaps that's where we're heading. Toward a culture that values being over branding, that honors depth over image, that teaches children not just to perform, but to know themselves beyond performance. Because the great tragedy of our time may not be material poverty, but existential disconnection. A society obsessed with self-image, but terrified of self-inquiry. We scroll, we curate, we construct. But do we know who we are when the noise stops? And when it finally does? When we sit, alone, in stillness? What remains? Not the name, not the titles, not the personas. Only this. Awareness, breathing itself into form. You are not your story. You are the space in which stories arise. You are not your image. You are the light behind the mirror. And that realization is not an ending, but a beginning. In the next part of our journey, we ask the most radical question yet. Is consciousness fundamental to the universe? Could it be that awareness is not a product of brains, but the very fabric of existence? We will travel beyond the mind, beyond the self, into the heart of reality itself. But for now, sit with this mystery. You are not just a self. You are awareness, aware of self. You are not the waves. You are the ocean. We now reach the threshold. After all the deconstruction, the peeling away of layers, the unraveling of narratives, the confrontation with multiplicity, we come not to answers, but to stillness. The question of the self does not conclude in clarity. It dissolves into presence. And yet, this presence is not empty. It is full, not with form, but with possibility. Not with identity, but with awareness. When we strip away the layers, social, cognitive, emotional, what remains is not void, but silence. A silence so deep it becomes luminous. And in that silence, something is realized. Not spoken, not conceptualized, but felt as truth. Across the spiritual traditions of the world, this realization has been named in many ways. In Zen, it is the moment when the question, "Who am I?" collapses and the mind falls away. In Sufism, it is Fana, the annihilation of the self in divine love. In Christian mysticism, it is the emptying of the soul to make room for God. In Taoism, it is returning to the source, the uncarved block, the nameless way. And always, the message is the same. The self must die, metaphorically, for life to begin in truth. But death, in this context, is not a negation. It is a doorway. The end of the false opens to the beginning of the real. The dropping of the costume reveals the actor, and then the actor too dissolves, and only awareness remains. What is this awareness? It cannot be grasped, only known. It is what watches. It is what notices. It is what remains when everything else changes. It was there in childhood, looking out through different eyes. It was there in dreams, shifting forms. It is there now, listening, present. And it will be there, still, when the final breath comes. Science, for all its brilliance, has not yet touched this. It can describe neural correlates, track patterns, predict behavior, but it cannot touch awareness. Because awareness is not an object. It is the ground of all objects, the stage on which all experience plays out. This does not mean we abandon the self, only that we stop believing it is all there is. We can still play the roles. We can still enjoy the dance, but we no longer mistake the mask for the face. We wear our names like clothes, necessary but not permanent. We speak our stories not as gospel but as poetry. And in this shift, something subtle yet radical occurs. We become less reactive, less trapped in drama, more spacious, more kind. Because when we are no longer obsessed with defending me, we become curious about we. When we are not busy preserving identity, we become available to wonder, to mystery, to love. This is not a spiritual bypass. It is not about escaping the world. On the contrary, it is about becoming truly intimate with it. Because when the self dissolves, the world enters. The wind is no longer outside. It is moving through you. The trees are not scenery. They are extensions of your breath. The suffering of others is no longer theoretical. It is felt in your own nervous system. And in this intimacy, responsibility awakens. Not the responsibility of obligation, but of love, of connection, of knowing that all things are not in awareness, they are awareness. And so how we treat them is how we treat ourselves. This is the culmination of the journey inward, not isolation but union, not erasure but expansion, not disappearance but revelation. You are not the self. You are the awareness in which the self rises and falls. You are not the wave. You are the ocean. You are not becoming. You are being. Sit with that. Let it soak through the mind. Let it whisper to your cells. Let it undo you. Because only in undoing do we find what was always there. And as the last veil drops, what remains is simple. Not a concept. Not a doctrine. Not a conclusion. Just this. I am. And that, without adjectives, without boundaries, without story, is enough. We have spent much of this journey looking inward, unraveling the nature of our thoughts, emotions, perceptions, and the elusive self that holds it all together. But now, we turn outward. And as we look at the stars, the galaxies, the endless black canvas of the cosmos, a radical question emerges, quietly and defiantly. Is consciousness not confined to the mind, but embedded in the fabric of the universe itself? This idea sounds fantastical at first. We are used to assuming that consciousness lives inside us, generated by the brain, localized behind our eyes. The world outside is inert, rocks, dust, gravity, motion. But there have always been those who questioned that boundary. Mystics, poets, philosophers, those who stared long enough into existence and felt not silence, but presence. Felt the universe look back. What if consciousness is not an accident of biology, but a property of reality? What if, like space or time, it is fundamental? In physics, we define matter by its behavior, its mass, its charge, its spin. But we don't know why these properties exist. We simply observe that they do, and the same could be said for consciousness. It is not something we can measure directly, but it is the only thing we know for certain. Everything we experience is filtered through it. Without consciousness, there is no observation, no thought, no experience at all. Some philosophers and scientists propose that consciousness might be a fundamental field, like electromagnetism, present everywhere, but only organized into familiar forms when certain conditions arise. Just as gravity exists throughout the universe, but only condenses into stars and planets under the right conditions, so too, Might consciousness emerge from the potential that is always there? This idea has a name: panpsychism. It suggests that all matter contains some form of awareness, even if incredibly primitive. A rock does not think, but it may feel in a way that defies our comprehension. An atom may not have a personality, but it may possess proto-consciousness, raw sensation, not yet shaped into identity. Panpsychism sounds bizarre until we consider the alternative. If matter is entirely unconscious, how does it give rise to experience? How does dead, mute material produce love, fear, beauty, wonder? The hard problem of consciousness, as coined by David Chalmers, remains unresolved. No matter how deeply we probe the brain, we find structures, processes, electricity, but never the spark of awareness itself. It's like taking apart a piano to find the music, and so panpsychism offers a daring reversal. Consciousness does not emerge from matter. Matter emerges in consciousness. This is not a fringe idea. It has been entertained by serious thinkers: Spinoza, Leibniz, Whitehead, Russell, and more recently, neuroscientists and quantum physicists, who are no longer satisfied with purely material explanations. But it also echoes what mystics have always known. In Vedanta, the entire universe is said to arise in Brahman, pure consciousness. The world is not separate from awareness, but a ripple within it. In Taoism, the Tao gives birth to all things, but itself is nameless, formless, yet ever-present. In Kabbalah, divine light contracts into form, yet remains hidden within all creation. Across traditions, we find this idea that reality is not dead, not empty, but alive, that everything we see, touch, and feel is vibrating with awareness. That, when we look at a tree, a star, a stranger, we are not looking at an other, but at another face of consciousness, wearing a different mask. This perspective changes everything. It means that the universe is not indifferent. It is intimate. That existence is not mechanical, it is relational. That when we speak, we are not shouting into the void, but whispering to ourselves, scattered across time and space. Even science, in its most advanced edges, hints at this possibility. In quantum physics, particles behave differently when observed. The act of measurement alters reality. Consciousness appears to be entangled with the material world in ways we do not yet understand. Is the observer separate from the observed? Or are they two sides of the same field? Some go further. Theoretical physicist John Wheeler proposed the participatory anthropic principle, the idea that the universe requires observation to exist in a meaningful way, that the cosmos becomes real through consciousness, not in a magical sense, but in a deeply mysterious one. The universe is not a thing, it is an event unfolding through awareness. What does this mean for us? It means that our minds are not anomalies. They are reflections of the cosmos itself. That our thoughts, our dreams, our very ability to ask these questions are not signs of separation, but of kinship. We are not tiny, insignificant specks lost in an ocean of darkness. We are expressions of that ocean, momentarily aware of itself. And this changes our story. Instead of humans standing apart from nature, we are nature waking up. Instead of consciousness as a rare glitch, it is the secret fire within every atom, every heartbeat, every breath. Even death, in this view, changes shape. If consciousness is not confined to the brain, then its cessation may not be its end. Just as a wave returns to the ocean, so too might our awareness return to the field from which it arose. Not as individuals, but as presence itself. Not as memory, but as mystery. This is not something we can prove, nor something we must believe, but it is something we can feel, in the quiet, in the stars, in the way a moment of stillness can open into eternity, in the way we sense that life is not just happening, but that something is watching, always there, and maybe, just maybe, that something is not separate from us. Maybe it is us, in our deepest being, in our silent knowing, in the awareness that has no name but knows its own face in everything. We will continue this journey next by examining how this awareness plays out in time, in memory, in transformation. We'll explore what it means to live as conscious beings in a conscious universe. But for now, rest in this idea. Let it ripple through you. The universe is not distant. It is not dumb. It is not indifferent. It is aware. Time is the river in which we all swim. It carries us from birth to death, from dawn to dusk, from memory to anticipation. But what is time, really? Is it a force, a flow, a structure? Is it out there, ticking in the cosmos? Or is it in us, shaped by consciousness itself? To explore this, we must first ask, why do we experience time at all? The present moment, the now, is all that ever truly exists. Yet, we constantly relive the past, anticipate the future, and place ourselves within a personal narrative that spans decades. Memory gives us the illusion of continuity. Expectation gives us the illusion of control. Together, they create the sense of a self moving through time. But when we look closer, this story begins to wobble. Neuroscience reveals that memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Every time we remember, we recreate the moment, altering it slightly. Memory is not stable. It is fluid, edited by emotion, bias, context. And the future, it's a canvas painted with probabilities, imagined from fragments of the past. Our sense of continuity is a mental construct, an elegant one, but still a construct. This leads to a startling realization. The past and future do not exist in any real, tangible way. They are mental events occurring in the present moment. The only thing that ever truly is now. Everything else is memory or imagination, both of which arise in consciousness, not outside of it. And yet, we live in time as if it is a place. We carry regrets, traumas, dreams, and plans as if they are physical objects. We resist the present in favor of what was or what could be. We construct identities around our timelines. When we were born, what we achieved, what we lost. But consciousness, in its raw form, is not tied to time. In deep meditation, in dreamless sleep, in moments of flow or awe, time disappears. Minutes stretch into eternities. Hours pass like seconds. The clock stops, and only experience remains. In fact, time may be an emergent property of consciousness. In quantum physics, equations governing reality are time-symmetric. They don't require a direction. But we experience time as flowing because our brains string moments together into stories. Consciousness doesn't exist in time. Time exists within consciousness. This opens the door to a deeper mystery. If we could escape this narrative construction, what would remain? What would it feel like to live entirely in the present, not as a concept, but as a state of being? Mystics describe this as enlightenment, awakening, presence, a way of living where each moment is complete, requiring nothing from the past or future. In this state, memory still exists, but it does not bind. Planning still occurs, but it does not consume. The now becomes luminous, infinite, whole. But we are not merely timeless awareness. We are also human beings, shaped by memory. Our stories matter, our wounds, our joys, our lineage, all color the lens through which we see. And memory, despite its distortions, is also a gift. It gives us meaning. It allows us to learn, to love, to mourn. Without memory, there is no identity. Without time, no growth. And so we are caught in a paradox. To awaken, we must transcend time. But to live fully, we must honor it. To be free, we must see through the illusion of self and time. But to be whole, we must also embrace our timeline, the journey of who we have been and who we may yet become. This is the dance of consciousness, eternal presence playing the role of a person in time. Some traditions resolve this paradox with a simple insight. You are not in time. Time is in you. Just as a dream appears within the dreamer, time appears within awareness. It is a lens, not a prison, a story, not a sentence. And when we truly see this, when we rest in the awareness that is untouched by past or future, a deep peace arises, not the peace of avoidance, but of clarity, a peace that comes from knowing we were never separate from the flow, never outside the river. We are the river, and the river is stillness, appearing as motion. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how this understanding transforms how we relate to others. We'll explore the role of empathy, interconnection, and the idea that we are not many consciousnesses, but one consciousness appearing as many. But for now, let the story of time rest. Let memory soften, let anticipation fall away, and feel, just for a moment, what it's like to simply be, here, now, always. When we speak of consciousness, we often speak in the singular, my consciousness, your experience, their awareness. But what if this division is false? What if behind the countless minds that move across the world, human and animal, ancient and future, there is only one awareness, one ocean, taking on many shapes? It is one of the oldest insights of mystical philosophy, the idea that consciousness is not personal, that it does not belong to individuals, but expresses itself through them, that your sense of I am is not unique to you. It is the same presence looking out from behind every pair of eyes, not metaphorically, literally. This concept is hard to grasp because our experiences feel so separate. I do not hear your thoughts. I do not feel your pain directly. And yet, there is something unmistakable in the way we recognize ourselves in others. A shared vulnerability, a flicker of empathy, a moment of laughter that bridges two souls. We say, I know how you feel, and sometimes we do. Not because we are reading minds, but because we are made of the same essence, the same awareness, wrapped in different stories. Science backs this up in subtle ways. Mirror neurons fire in our brains not only when we perform an action, but when we witness someone else performing it. When we see someone cry, our body mirrors the emotion. When someone yawns, we yawn. We are wired for empathy because we are not as separate as we believe. Our identities, shaped by bodies and biographies, may appear isolated, but our being, our capacity to feel, to witness, to care, is shared. Consciousness, like light, is not divided by the windows through which it shines. This changes how we relate. When we see others as separate, competition arises. Fear, control. When we see others as extensions of the same awareness, something else arises. Compassion, not pity, not obligation, but a natural response as if to our own pain. This is why the golden rule exists in every culture. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Because in the deepest sense, they are you. The boundaries are paper thin. Underneath skin color, language, belief, and circumstance, the same pulse beats. The same mystery lives. In the modern world, we've forgotten this. We've built societies around separation. My country, my property, my success. We rank, we divide, we isolate. And yet, this never brings peace. Because something in us knows we are not meant to be alone. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the illusion of being separate. And it dissolves the moment we touch another soul, not with words, but with presence, with the silent recognition. I see you. And in seeing you, I remember myself. This interconnection extends beyond humans. Indigenous traditions speak of all beings as relatives, trees, rivers, animals, stars. Modern ecology affirms this. The breath you take now contains molecules from ancient oceans. The carbon in your bones was forged in dying stars. You are not in nature. You are nature. A momentary flowering of the earth, conscious of itself. When we realize this, we move from domination to stewardship, from control to care, from separation to relationship. We stop seeing the world as resources and begin to see it as sacred. And in that sacredness, a new ethic is born, not imposed, but lived. We stop asking, what do I want? And begin asking, what does life want through me? We stop pursuing happiness and discover joy, not in getting, but in giving, not in achieving, but in being with. This is the awakening of relational consciousness, the shift from I am me to I am us. It does not erase individuality, it reveals its true place, not a fortress, but a doorway, a point of contact where the one meets itself in the many. When a baby smiles at you, something opens. When a stranger helps you in silence, something moves. When a friend weeps in your arms, something is known, not intellectually, but soul to soul. That knowing is consciousness, remembering itself. And the more we open to it, the less we cling to the egoic story. We begin to live not from fear, but from trust, not from defense, but from openness. Life becomes less about control and more about communion. This doesn't mean abandoning boundaries or dissolving into the crowd. It means recognizing that beneath all boundaries is a shared source. One fire, many sparks. One sky, countless waves of light. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how this understanding changes the way we live, from our decisions and relationships to our sense of purpose. What happens when we stop chasing identity and start living as presence? But for now, let yourself soften. Feel the thread that connects you to every being who ever lived. You are not alone. You never were. You are the universe, looking back at itself through a million eyes. To understand the nature of consciousness is to understand that we are never truly alone. The loneliness we feel is not a flaw in our design. It is the echo of a deeper truth trying to break through. It is the call of the one seeking itself in the many. And in that call is an invitation. Remember that you are not your name. You are not your failures, your fears, your achievements. You are not your past, and you are not your dreams. You are what hears all of those. You are what knows. And what you know, in the silence behind all identities, is that you are connected. Empathy is not an emotion, it is a recognition. It is the soul's memory surfacing. When you see someone in pain and feel it in your chest, that is not simulation. That is truth. That is the field of consciousness overlapping through different bodies, different faces, but a single being. We often think of unity as a concept, something spiritual or abstract, but it is also neurological, biological, emotional. A baby placed on a mother's chest synchronizes heartbeats. Lovers in deep intimacy enter similar brainwave states. When people sing together, their nervous systems harmonize. When a crowd moves together in silence, awe arises, not from doctrine, but from resonance. This is not metaphor, it is physics. It is life's design. Yet we live in cultures that reward isolation, individualism, competition. We are taught to be separate, to be safe, to be strong, to be successful. And so we hide our tenderness. We armor ourselves. We suppress the very capacities that connect us to life. But the soul does not forget. Even in trauma, the yearning for wholeness persists. When we are hurt, we don't stop caring. We just stop trusting. When we are betrayed, we don't stop loving. We just hide. But the desire to connect is always there, flickering beneath the fear. Healing is not fixing what is broken. It is remembering what was never truly separate. And that remembering begins in presence. Not in solving, not in analyzing, but in being with. To sit with someone in pain, not to rescue, but to see them, is one of the holiest acts a human can perform. To witness without judgment, to hold space without agenda, is to become a mirror in which the other remembers their own light, because light is what we are. Consciousness is not a cold awareness, it is luminous. It reveals, it embraces, it loves, not sentimentally, but foundationally. The very act of being aware is an act of inclusion. I make space for this to exist. This is why deep spiritual awakening always leads to love, not the emotion, but the state. A love that sees no boundary, a love that asks nothing, a love that simply is. In this state, even suffering changes texture. We no longer see it as punishment or failure, but as part of the dance. A contraction in the one, seeking release. A forgetting that calls forth remembering. Pain becomes a doorway. Grief becomes sacred. Loss becomes a teacher. And so we begin to live differently. We listen more. We defend less. We stop needing to be right because we realize truth is not owned. It is shared. We stop needing to win because we realize everyone's joy is our own. This changes everything, from relationships to politics to how we walk through the world. Compassion is no longer optional. It is inevitable. Justice becomes not a demand, but an expression of love in public form. Ecology becomes sacred work because the earth is not other. It is the body of the one, trembling with life. And slowly we shift from scarcity to generosity, from fear to trust, from performance to presence. This is the return to communion, not uniformity, but unity, not erasure of differences, but celebration of our shared source. Each being becomes a note in the symphony of being. Each moment becomes holy because it is consciousness meeting itself again and again and again. The poet Rumi said, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." This is not poetic exaggeration. It is the secret we've always known. The self is the dream, consciousness is the dreamer, and when the dreamer remembers itself, there is peace. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how this awareness transforms the choices we make, the purpose we find, and the lives we build. We'll look at what it means to live as an awakened presence in a world that still believes in separation. But for now, pause. Let this remembering settle. You are not alone. You are not separate. You are not small. You are the one, appearing as many. And you are waking up. What does it mean to live from awareness? Not just to know that we are consciousness, not just to believe in unity or speak of it in lofty tones, but to walk it, to let it shape our choices, our relationships, our time, our voice, to embody the truth that we are not separate. This is where the journey of consciousness comes home, not in mountaintop revelations or mystical ecstasy, but in how we treat a stranger, in how we speak to a child, in how we breathe when no one is looking, in how we live when there is no reward. For most of us, awakening begins as a glimpse, a moment where the mind falls away and everything feels impossibly alive, a breath that stretches into eternity, a silence that feels full instead of empty, a moment of recognition. This is what I am. But that glimpse fades. The phone rings. The bills arrive. The ego resumes its performance. And so we begin the real work, not to chase the state, but to stabilize the seeing, to let our lives become expressions of what we've remembered. This means living from presence, not just visiting it. It means anchoring awareness in each conversation, each step, each act of care. It means watching the ego arise, not with shame or scorn, but with curiosity and compassion. "Ah, there you are again," we say to our defensiveness, our fear, our pride. You too are part of this moment. The path of conscious living is not about perfection. It is not about having no more thoughts, no more mistakes. It is about returning, again and again, to now, to the breath, to the space before the reaction, to the silent witness behind the performance. In this return, the small choices become sacred. When you listen, truly listen, to someone without planning your reply, you are living as awareness. When you pause before anger and breathe into the gap, you are living as awareness. When you care for your body, not as an object, but as an expression of the whole, you are honoring the temple of presence. And when you forgive, not because it's deserved, but because clinging to resentment no longer feels aligned, you are moving in the rhythm of the awakened heart. These choices ripple. They reshape relationships, soften conflict, plant seeds of peace. They don't require others to awaken for us to live from truth. In fact, the world may not notice at first, but we will, and that is enough. Eventually, presence becomes less something we do and more what we are. It is no longer a practice, it is the natural state, the center from which life flows. This doesn't mean we escape difficulty. Pain still comes, loss still arrives, but they are held differently. They pass through us like weather, not because we are indifferent, but because we are rooted in something deeper than emotion. We are rooted in being. Purpose, too, shifts. We no longer ask, "What do I want to do?" but, "What does life want to express through me?" The obsession with achievement gives way to authenticity. Success is no longer measured by approval, but by alignment. Are we living from truth? Are we serving what matters? Are we letting love shape our days? This doesn't make us passive. Quite the opposite. An awakened life is often active, but not agitated. We work, create, speak, build, but not from fear or lack. We do it because it flows from the deep well of being, because the world is not something to conquer, but to serve. We begin to see each person not as a character in our movie, but as a reflection of the same presence we found within. The cashier, the partner, the stranger, the critic, each one is a mirror. And when we greet them with presence, something sacred ignites. A tiny portal opens, and in that moment, both are lifted. This is what the mystics meant when they said, "The kingdom of heaven is within." It is not elsewhere. It is here, when we are fully present, when we love without condition, when we meet the moment without resistance. But presence is not just personal, it is political, it is ecological, it is revolutionary. To live as awareness in a world built on fear is to become a quiet rebellion, not by fighting, but by not forgetting, by staying soft in a culture that rewards hardness, by telling the truth when lies are more profitable, by seeing the sacred where others see only cost. Each moment we live from presence, we offer the world an alternative. We become a node of coherence in the noise, a tuning fork of sanity in the chaos. We remind others, not through words, but through being, that peace is possible. This is how the world changes. Not all at once, not through force, but one person, one breath, one choice at a time. And if enough of us awaken, not to beliefs, but to being, a tipping point comes. A culture begins to shift. A species begins to remember that it was never separate, that it was always the universe, dreaming itself into form, and that it can wake up, not with violence, but with love. In the final part of our journey, we'll let go of questions, we'll rest in the mystery, we'll close not with answers, but with silence, the doorway through which all awareness flows. But for now, ask yourself, gently, what would my life look like if I lived not from fear, but from presence? Not from identity, but from awareness. And begin, with this breath, to live the answer. And now we arrive, not at an end, not at a conclusion, but at a return to the place we never truly left, a return to the stillness that has been here all along, quiet, unwavering, unnoticed. We have traveled through thoughts, theories, histories, and insights. We've explored the nature of self, the fabric of time, the illusion of separation, the miracle of interconnection. We've stepped beyond identity, beyond language, and into awareness itself. And now, there is nothing more to say. Because the truth we've been pointing to cannot be spoken, it cannot be owned, it cannot be known as an object, it can only be recognized in silence. This silence is not absence, it is not emptiness, it is presence without form, being without boundary. It is the space in which everything arises, the thoughts, the sounds, the stories, and it remains untouched by all of them. It is what you are, right now, without effort. You are aware, not because you tried, not because you thought, but because you are. This simple awareness, the one hearing these words, the one beneath all experience, it has never changed. It was with you in childhood. It will be with you at death. It is not personal. It is not separate. It is the same awareness that looks through every set of eyes, the same presence that listens in the trees, that rests in the stars, that breathes in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. You have never been apart from it. You are not on a journey to find yourself. You are the path. You are the witness. You are the silence. In the deepest traditions, this is known as non-duality, not two. No separation between observer and observed, self and other, inside and out. Only this, only now. But even this is a concept, and so we let go of the ideas, of the seeking, of the need to understand. There is nothing wrong with thought, nothing wrong with story. But when they fall away, what remains is freedom. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to be. And in being, everything is enough. The world does not need you to be more than what you are. It needs you to be here, fully, gently, lovingly, to see with open eyes, to listen with a soft heart, to touch each moment as if it were the first and the last. Because it is. This moment is all there ever is. And in this moment, the entire universe is alive, in you, as you. There is nothing to achieve, nowhere to arrive, nothing to prove, nothing to become. There is only this breath, this awareness, this stillness. Rest here. Let yourself fall into the mystery, not to escape life, but to become it. Not to know the answers, but to dissolve into the question. Not to reach enlightenment, but to remember that you already are the light. And in that remembering, let yourself be free, not someday, now, always now.